This morning in North Carolina, wheels are spinning. Determination is winning. A passion is now a thriving business, and it shows no signs of slowing down. How? The power of a conversation, like the one Clint Spiegel had with First Horizon Bank about starting a bike wheel manufacturing facility in Asheville. Now it's not just talk, it's rubber meets road. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Clint. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.
What is the state of radio today? What advice could we give potential radio advertisers? We got a couple of industry experts, some people with feet on the streets, and more, all today on Marketing Madmen.
They say marketing is a madman's game. So now we turned it over to the Marketing Madmen with Nick Constantino and Trip Job.
Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here. And, we've been kind of blowing through some of the things that businesses are looking at this time of year. And that is, their budget, where do they spend their money? We talked a lot about social media last week. So why don't we use the time? I mean, right now, traffic is back. We're in our cars. And the ads have been prolific, whether it's sports related, whether it's political related, whether it's someone else trying to get in the mainstream. But I think radio is obviously it's a medium we're on, but it's a medium that I think we've seen a lot of change and a lot of opportunity, and some businesses don't think about it. So hopefully today, Nick, will get your experience. We got a few other people coming in, and
sure,
let's talk about. Where is the state of radio?
Sure.
Where it's going, what has changed? And there's been a lot of change,
sure,
from my early career where when you would think about buying radio to today. So.
Sure. Well, let's throw it out by saying first that most radio people are boring. It is an old medium, so we're going to try to go through this fast and keep this lively, and for multiple reasons, but mainly because, it's a 100-year-old industry. It was cool. I was in Florence, Italy, and the grave of Marconi, who invented the radio in the 1500s, 1600s is there, and his grave is there, and I remember I sending Colan a picture just as I started working here. I was like, pretty cool, because there's a war named after this guy, all this stuff, but it shows how old the industry is.
Yeah.
Also, we found out during COVID that there was a law passed in the late 60s to which that radio is essential. Okay, so first and foremost, if an EMP hits and there's no other way to get the masses, hand crank radio is the only way messages are going to be relayed. TV doesn't work, internet doesn't work. So radio is an essential part of infrastructure, which has made it so hard for radio stations to disappear because the government needs that bandwidth to reach everybody. It's also one of the few mediums that has chartered to the community. So we actually have EEO obligations. We have a public charter. We can lose our license if we are not serving the interest of the community. Now, serving the interest of the community can be misconstrued and manipulated in multiple ways, but ultimately all it's saying is that we have a obligation to serve our community with messaging, with events, with all these things that reach there. That is not there. Facebook doesn't have it. Twitter doesn't have it. I promise you, there's nowhere on the internet that says you have to serve the public good. Just look at the internet for 5 minutes. You'll see how little it does to serve the public good. So that's, I think, one of the common misconceptions is that it really has this charter, and also it's SEC regulated. It's FCC, Federal Communications Commission's regulated, which means we have affidavits, we have notaries, everything we do, the steps involved is insane.
Well, I love what you said about community, because I think, one of the other things, I think where radio has gotten better and the chance for small businesses or mid-sized businesses to be involved is the ability to use it as a content platform, and that there's a lot of, just like we're doing, but there's a lot of regular radio shows out there that, they're getting across information that's good for the community, and there's an opportunity for businesses to tie into that, as part of that content, and then also maybe as, advertising or PR as well. So you don't get that on TV.
No.
All right. And you can say you have influencers and all in some social media, but it's more about the flash in the pan. It's less about the content. And I think that's one of the things, and that's understanding what's the right fit. Not every business makes sense for radio. All right, just like not every business makes sense for TikTok.
For sure.
And I think that's really kind of understanding where you fit and what's the right medium for your audience.
Yeah, and I love how you said content. One of the other differentiating factors of radio, this company produces, distributes, and sells advertising to its own content. we own the content.
Yeah.
If you look at TV, most TV stations are airing other people's content. The internet, nothing on the internet is their own. It's just sharing information around. So we actually, all of the content in which we create from these studios, we distribute and advertise it. We control the entire environment, which is very rare. And honestly, one of the biggest flaws that radio has made is that they relied solely on syndicating shows and having this web where one station is sending a show to hundreds of stations. There's a lot of reasons why that's wrong. First and foremost, nothing out of New York is applicable to Atlanta. Nothing out of California is applicable to Atlanta. And radio's strength is its hyper-local locality. Syndicating content, which is cheaper and which is easier, actually has been what has led to one of the downfalls of radio.
Yeah. So we've got, in the next two segments, we've got a couple of experts coming in. So why don't we hit the high, kind of the 30,000 foot level to get, business owners to think about it. And to me, one of the first things is, radio is not the fix-all. It's not the only thing you should be doing. And I think, in the past, maybe people thought of it, okay, it was how do I connect people in drive time in the morning or the afternoon? But I've seen it where it's been successful is you have to integrate it with your other parts of marketing, whether it's your digital efforts, whether it's, look, if it is about certain things, drive time, it might be billboards and the like, but it's not to be used by itself. And I think that's one of the big change over the last decade.
Yeah, and I agree completely. And I think that there's different ways to use radio to fulfill different parts of a sales funnel. That was also something that has been done poorly. Like, it's not always about building brand. It's not always about those last minute clicks and that end of road attribution. But what about decision and interest and driving purchases? You said it about influencer before. We used to call them endorsers. And there are guys in this radio station that have been influencing this community for 30 years. That's a lot more impactful in the long run than somebody who's a flash in the pan TikTok star. So, influence, we may change the words, but ultimately those endorsers and those community advocates are really powerful in that message. And I think when you talk about, how you use radio, we used to, unfortunately, when I started, really be, no, don't spend money in digital. Spend money with us. That is a very poor way to look at it. And there's multiple reasons, but most importantly, if that company is not optimized with their digital presence, how the heck are you going to find them? How is the radio commercial going to matter? They may say your name 100 times, but if they Google your name and your competitor pops up, or you have no SEO, how are they going to find you? So I think how radio plays into the funnel has changed, but I think most smart radio stations have adapted the way they sell it to be more full funnel oriented.
Hey, Nick just made a great point for any business leader out there. If whether it's an agency or it's whatever the media is, tells you, no, you need to spend all your money here and focus on me and not any others. I don't care if it's the radio, the digital, the email, you name it, run. Okay, that you got to integrate. And I'm not saying
agencies
you need to be
self-serving. No way. Oh my goodness, who would have thought?
And I don't mean peanut butter across 10 different platforms. Okay, but find out your audience and pick the 2 to 4, maybe 5 if you're a bigger company. But the media that makes sense for your audience. And that is so critically important. And that's probably even more important than maybe where you choose.
Yeah,
how you do it and implement it. So
I agree. And I also think that sometimes we dilute ourselves with talking about all the other things. Look, at its core, this is a radio station. We have programmatic, we have podcasts, we have influencers, we have digital, we have events, all those things. But all of those things are driven back to and from the radio station. So ultimately, if we were not good at radio, those other things wouldn't exist. So before you fall for the sleight of hand of an advertiser or an agency telling you all these things that they can do, make sure that their core competency is good. And our core competency, radio's core competency, is reaching a lot of people, a lot of times, very conveniently and easily. That is the most important part of radio, and that should not change across the entire medium.
And I think, so one of the things you mentioned there is, you reach it a lot of times, so it's then consistency. And, we'll probably get into the next segment some of the best practices and some of the things that haven't worked. And, but it is a medium where you have to tell a story. It is a medium where you have to be consistent and understand that, once in a while you hit lightning in a bottle and you grab someone the first time something runs. But the reality is it's building that awareness and getting your message, being consistent with that, and having that sink in over time.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that's where digital comes in and endorsements come in to speed up the response rate, because one of the hardest things to tell a business over is it's going to take 6 months to work. And honestly, when you do explain it and they do understand why, it makes sense. And ultimately, if you think you're building a brand looking for instant gratification, you're foolish, right? The internet is made to get that immediate response and that instant gratification. But as you look at those 6 month windows, the digital might speed it up because now you are getting that instant gratification, and then those curves eventually meet each other. So I think that the hardest part of selling radio is explaining to people in a generation that wants now, is that it's going to take time for it to work.
Right. And so if you're a business, and look, we hear it a lot. We hear the home improvement guys. We hear, some of the lawn care and, outdoor remodeling type people. If you think that, okay, it's 2 weeks before the season starts and now's the time to do your campaign, you're too late. Not that you can't build a campaign, but don't expect, in the first 2 weeks to build up your pipeline right before the season, because it will take a little bit of time. And you want to be thinking about what the season is, how to build your campaign, how to build the awareness, and then start to integrate it, as you said, maybe with your promotions, email and otherwise, to drive people to making those decisions.
Yeah. So before Colan comes on, because I don't want him to hear this part, I'm going to give a tip for radio. If you do go to a company who is a radio station, who you are planning on advertising on, and 2 weeks beforehand, they not only have inventory, but are willing to offer you a discount, that radio station sucks at either selling or what they're putting on air, because we are sold out almost all the time. And we have a real supply demand curve. And if you're trying to get on 2 weeks before the Brave season starts, you're paying triple what you were paying if you had done it a month earlier. Right. So I'm not saying don't advertise. I'm saying if you can get a deal, I am a advocate of radio. I think the rising tide lifts all ships. I am just saying that there is a reason that inventory is available and that product is discounted if it's available 2 weeks before you start.
Well, and that's a great way to ask a question, because I've, being on the other side of the coin, I have had properties that I've dealt with that have come in and had businesses pull back. Okay, we're going into potentially recession next year. There will be businesses that pull back, and all of a sudden you have a chance to fill a spot, all right, versus something that is just wide open. That is completely different, and a lot of times you can get in and get a great placement because another business backed out versus having it just wide open empty.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, if you understand marketing and how to market during a recession, then you are smart enough to look for those things, and I think opportunities will present themselves to you. But I think that radio really, it should apply to an airline or hotel model where the inventory is finite and there's a supply-demand curve towards it. So when you are negotiating, ask those kind of questions, because if they're not empowered to have those kind of conversations, you're probably talking to the wrong person.
No, there's no question about that. So hopefully that's a little bit of a kind of a primer to get us started in the discussion. After the break, we're going to have Colan Wheat of 680 The Fan and Extra 106.3 come in and kind of give some of his background and expertise, and we'll talk a little more about some of the finer points of radio and how to use it. So you're listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3.
Don't miss the 10 for $10 produce sale this week at Safeway. Get select produce like large Hass avocados, mangoes, cucumbers, large lemons, green, red, or yellow bell peppers, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for only $1 each. Also this week at Safeway, select meats or buy one, get one free. Get items like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef or 16-ounce containers of Jenny O 93% lean ground turkey, burger patties or Italian style or taco style ground turkey. Buy one, get one free. Visit Safeway.com for more great deals.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madmen. Trip, Job, and Nick Constantino here, and we're fortunate to have Colan Wheat with Dickey Broadcasting. And you're pretty much a lifelong radio expert, I guess, and it's in your family and your blood from everything I've known for a few years. So,
well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show today. And yes, I am a third generation radio person. It's kind of crazy thinking that radio's been around for 3 generations, but I'm proud to have three family members have all been in the business of radio, and more importantly, we've had some great success in radio, and that's one of the things that we are proud of. And some people might call me a radio junkie, I guess.
Yeah, well, radio and sports junkie, and obviously that ties into 680. But why don't you give a little more about your background? I mean, you've seen not just here in Atlanta, but you've gotten a pretty broad spectrum of the industry in your career.
So I've worked for now 4 different radio companies: J-Core, Clear Channel, Cumulus, and now on the private side of Dickey Broadcasting. I've been in sales my entire career, and I always say that the great part about sales is the ability to help businesses grow and sustain their relevance in a local marketplace. And that's ultimately the strength of what and why I love radio, is the ability for local business to grow. And by the way, national business grows through radio too. But the thing that I've always had the pleasure of dealing with is the local advertiser, the guy that is trying to figure out whatever keeps him up at night.
Well, I think one of the things we're going to jump into is how do we help businesses understand where radio fits in that mix. But you mentioned a comment in your time here with Dickey. I bet you've got clients that have probably been, maybe you give a range, either some that just came on this year to some that may go back 5 or 10 years. I mean, I think that maybe can speak to the testament of radio by the length of some clients that you've seen.
Yeah, the line that our owner, David Dickey, likes to say is that we measure our clients not by days and years, but by decades. And I think you can look at some of the great brands that we've worked with over those past 30 years we'll be celebrating next year for Dickey Broadcasting. And you think about the Frank Duffy at Duffy Realty of Atlanta, the Superior Plumbing, the Artisan Custom Closets. These are all decade-long advertisers with us, and they've really built their business. And there are big national brands they're competing against, and they built their brand on a local level by doing 2 things. One, remaining consistent on radio. They've been through, you think about 2008, obviously we had a downturn in the economic situation where we're now going through what they call another inflationary or economic downturn, and you're seeing that again. You're going to see the brands locally that want to compete remain strong through their marketing efforts.
Yeah, and before we get to the specific questions, because I think where radio goes, how it fits in the marketing mix is all important, I do want to point out that Colan has a pretty tenured legacy here across radio and everything, but single-handedly the most important thing to his legacy will be hiring me to Dickey Broadcasting Company. So we're tethered together now, and all of his success will be based upon what I do over the next couple of years. So wanted to point that out. So let's start. So Colan, let's kind of go back to the beginning, the easy part. Where does radio fit in today's marketing mix? When you look at a full funnel approach, when you look at digital, where does radio fit in, and how do people use it properly?
Ultimately, I think people have always looked at radio as what I would oftentimes refer to it as an aerial assault. It creates brand awareness, but the reality of radio is that it actually has the ability to be at both at the top and at the bottom of the funnel. Top of the funnel being the brand awareness, the bottom of the funnel is actually creating and driving direct sales. And that is what you see all the time. Great example of that you'll see on radio is Omaha Steaks or My Pillow, where they're literally driving direct sales. How many calls did we get off of that actual ad that we put on radio? And the great thing is radio can be very successful on that side of things. However, I've always said that if you use radio properly, you don't try to create an urgent message. You try to create a long-term brand. I use the idea of it is if you go into a battle, you would love to have the aerial assault and the ground warriors down there fighting hand to hand. You need both. Right. If you don't have both, it's a very difficult war to win. And I truly believe that radio has the unique ability to do both in both ways. However, one thing that I've always said is you talked about the word media mix. There has to be a media mix. Radio's greatest strength is working in conjunction with other advertising, whether that's digital, whether in the old days that was Yellow Pages, but it needs to have that additional assistance.
Works great with billboards.
I knew Colan could talk. I didn't know he was actually listening to us before the break, but yes, no, we agree. I think one of the things you hit on that consistency, and we were talking about, let's use the home improvement guys, and it is a case of you need to be consistent throughout the year. Now, you may ramp up your mix shortly before certain types of seasons, maybe the early spring season or the fall winter, type season. But, that idea that some of these long-term advertisers have been there and they're always keeping the brand relevant, but then they maybe have 2 or 3 times of the year they amp it up a little bit, not to try to just grab that promotion, but that's the time that they know some more decisions are going to be coming.
What's interesting about marketing is the ultimate goal is to be known before you need it. That's
Right.
one of the key statements we always say in advertising, is that if you're not known before you need it, it's really hard to create that urgency that is desired when the actual product is needed. But there's different ways you can look at marketing. You look at in the pest control business, you have some businesses that say, you know what, in Atlanta, Georgia, or across Georgia, bugs are happening 12 months a year. You have other ones that sit and say during the spring and fall are the only times we need to be on the air, because that's when bugs are really trying to get in the house.
Yeah.
Different philosophies, and they're both very successful companies. I look at marketing very simple. If you have a plan and you stick to that plan, it's amazing how oftentimes you'll be successful. And that goes to your consistency that you spoke about. And to me, I want marketing to be something that we focus on with more than just consistent, but also the message. Messaging in radio is so important. What are you ultimately trying to get out of the actual marketing message itself?
Yeah, no, that's critical, and that's that alignment and that message. And you talked about strategy even. If you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, then you can't get the messaging right in general. And then how do you get that message right for a radio medium that's different? You're creating the imagery, right?
Yeah, theater of the mind.
Maybe, yeah,
Huge
exactly.
part of it
So
all.
I think that's one of the questions was, what's the biggest misconception of radio? And maybe that's, we can tie that into the messaging, is how do you get your messaging across in radio? And is that really a challenge?
The first thing is we oftentimes try to put too much in an individual message itself. And advertising, especially when it comes to radio, whether it's a 60, 30, or 15, needs to be focused on one message. And I think oftentimes we want to be a lot to a lot of different people. But when we think about marketing, we have the ability to run different commercials and create different messaging for different commercials. But we have to remember we got to create frequency off each one of those messages. In each commercial, there needs to be one focus. The thing I also want to make sure that everyone knows about radio is that there is the ability, and I hear this about the internet. Well, I can really put a message out there on Facebook, and I can focus on men 35, 64, and they live in this area. Radio does the same thing.
Yeah.
Radio has the same ability to reach a defined audience. I joke for 6A to the Fan. We deliver an audience that is a little bit broader because sports is more universal, and it's more, there aren't limitations to sports. However, when you think about our sister station, and really the core audience for 680 is a male that's 45 to 54 years old. That's the ultimate core. It's broader than that. But what's the sister station? Well, the sister station might be like a Q100. As I said, the Mad Mom in a minivan. And we can define what those audiences are. And I think that's what makes radio so exciting. And that's what makes it so affordable to buy, too.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think back to, all the times I'm sitting on the other side of the desk and I'm dealing with various media and agencies. And, the key is we always would look at what are some of our target demographics, and then what are whether it was print, whether it was radio, whether it was at TV at times. And that is a little bit of the mass. So we wanted some of that. And then we wanted the digital that, maybe it is a little more fine-tuned. But by itself, we couldn't just rifle shot. We needed, to your point, the air cover, right? And so, a lot of, I think, misconceptions are that businesses can't target through radio, print, et cetera, and you actually can. It's where you choose to put your message, and that's that starting point.
Yeah, and I think two misconceptions that I think we can talk about, at least from our standpoint, are one, that you can't target, and two, you can't track.
Yep.
Okay, so technology has evolved, radio has evolved. Can't target is absolutely insane. And the reason I say that is because we have such advanced data nowadays. Streaming radio, the app, has helped us bring in such large data sets that now we are not basing on who we're targeting on million-person sample sizes, right? I'm not saying every radio station has that capability, but what I'm saying is Nielsen as a core is flawed in how they go about this. The sample size is too small, too much margin for error. So if you look at who we're reaching, I can tell you what time of day we're reaching. Well, I can tell you that the Braves audience is different than the regular audience. I can tell you that the Georgia Tech audience is different. I can tell you what they like, what they do, what they're interested in. That gets really granular. I'm not saying you need to use that all the time, but the misconception is that you have more data on the internet. Well, we have a sample size of 1 million people on the internet that are also a sample size of the radio. So we have that ability. The other one is results, and are we driving results and trackability? We have an attribution system that will literally listen to the radio station, hear every time your company is mentioned, and then track web lift within 10 to 15 minutes of that spot running. That is powerful for multiple reasons. But as that product evolves, now we can track which keywords they're searching for. Now we can track if you're coming in organically or direct. So all of a sudden now, not only are we tracking the direct response, which Colan talked about, not only are we tracking the, hey, your buddies called you, said you heard you on the radio, but now we're tracking web lift and how that's coming in through what channels. So that is an incredibly powerful tool. And what we've come to realize in looking at that is if you can get direct up on your channels, that means people are typing your website in. That means radio is working. For the longest time, Google and all of the web companies has taken credit for that end of funnel. Well, if it's organic search, where the heck do you think they heard the brand? They never heard of the brand on Google. They're searching for something they heard of. So before everyone gets wooed and distracted by these digital companies coming in offering these things, ask those questions. Ask what the organic search lift was. Ask what the direct was, because those are things that radio and TV and billboards really add to. That the misconception is that they're not driving results, but realistically, people are searching for you. That is a result. Right. That is driving action. So I had to throw it out there. I had to get into the weeds. I know,
yeah.
But so on that note, Colan, podcasts. Let's talk about podcasts. And yes, this is a podcast, so please ignore whatever he's going to say negative. Podcasts are sexy right now. We've seen CPMs for $25, which, just for some context, we get availed to this day for $6 radio. And that's saying that a podcast is 4 times more valuable than the radio, which is insane. But how do they stack up against radio? What would you recommend to people looking to buy podcasts? And please go gentle on us.
Yeah, look, I think it's real simple when you think about the podcast industry. I grew up in radio, and the idea of radio is radio works with reach and frequency. You have to reach a certain amount of people, and you have to do it frequently enough. I think about it with my kids. I have to tell them to turn off the lights after they leave a room multiple times. And by the way, it's still a continuing effort on myself and my wife every single day to try to convince my kids to turn off lights. That's frequency at its best. The problem with podcasts is that they're produced on a weekly basis. This podcast is done once a week. And you think about frequency, it takes a long time when it comes to frequency to do things over week after week after week. It will work. Podcasts will work for advertising. That's without a doubt. The bottom line, though, is most advertisers aren't willing to wait week after week after week. So it's establishing the expectation of what people are to get when they buy a podcast. And then the reach. I could be wrong on this statement, but I think to be in the top 1% of all podcasts downloaded, you have to have 100 downloads. That's it. Wow. Which means the reach of an individual podcast is very slim. Yeah, it's just not as broad as you think.
We are
is.
1%ers.
Well, so the number, that was a COVID number. A lot of podcasts have fallen off the face of the earth since then. So probably, but even more so, if you are in 3,000 downloads, you're in the top 0.01% of podcasts. And to be honest with you, our radio station at any moment is hitting tens of thousands of people. Our stream for 6A The Fan hits more than most podcasts at any given time. Yeah. So I think, there is value in some of the bigger name podcasts, right? Yeah. Freakonomics stuff, you should know those bigger ones, those have core audiences. They're listened to all the time. But ask what podcast you're going to be on, because if it's a flash in the pan one, the response rate is just not the same.
Yeah, and I think it's part of layering. So what you're talking about is, because it may take longer, if that's the only thing you're doing, you're going to have a problem. But if it's layered in a podcast with radio, with digital, with other mediums, that's how you work it together.
Ultimately, the media mix that you have to have. I want to use this reference to go back to radio. I talked about my father being in radio. In 1970, radio had a 93% reach of people listening to radio on a weekly basis. This is what's crazy. The smallest age group right now is 18 to 34-year-olds using radio, and it's still 84% of 18 to 34-year-olds use radio each and every week. Think about that. That's an insane number. And when you get to the older, it gets up to that 93% level. And radio really hasn't changed. While we continue to see all these new media develop, whether it is podcasting, whether it is streaming, radio relatively itself has remained unchallenged or non-challenged. And I think that's the great part of what the industry has. Now, the cool thing about radio is that the wording changes. It's now called audio. We're in an audio industry.
Right, we talked about influencer versus endorser. Right? It is amazing how quickly it switched.
Yeah. So, we talked a lot of different things. What would be the one thing you would give a potential advertiser as a kind of a, top advice or top one or two things? We talked a little bit about messaging, but I think that we can get deep in the weeds there. But what else would you give them as advice?
I like to use analogies. Yeah. And the first analogy I always tell people is when they want to lose weight and they go to the gym, do they start measuring their success 1 week into going to the gym? Well, too often people do, and then they stop going to the gym. That happens in radio too. When you want to build your business, it can't be done in 1 week or 2 weeks. It's got to be done over time. If you go to the gym for 6 months, likelihood you're going to see success. And you're going to see success in losing weight. You're going to feel better about yourself. The same thing happens in advertising. If you're on the air for 6 months, you'll start seeing your advertising work. Yeah. It takes time to build. It just doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, there's another tie-in with that analogy. Also, if you go to the gym once a week, it's very different than if you go to the gym 6 times a week. So if you're trying to really lose weight and you went for 6 months, but you're only doing 1 day a week, well, how much progress are you going to make? However, if you go 6 days out of the week, that's the same thing as frequency. Right. If you want to start in radio by only spending $1,000 a month, it might take 2 years to get going because realistically, all you're doing is spreading that investment level. So the analogy works on many levels in radio.
Don't dabble. I mean, taking the analogy, Colin and I have a friend that goes to the gym once or twice a week, and he probably spends 15 minutes of the entire workout actually working out, and the rest of the time dabbling and talking and other things, right? So the same thing. If you pick, okay, well, I'll do this for a week, and then I'll come back in 2 weeks, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I think ultimately radio, when you talk about radio, the other piece of advice I would give people is to make sure as you put a schedule together, don't forget about the actual copy itself. It is the one thing we get lost in is I got to get the right price, but the message is just as important as price. If you don't have a message, if you don't have something that is what you're trying to track, are you driving that in the message? And I use the example, Nick talked about attribution. We've had numerous times where advertisers will say, well, my phone didn't ring. And then you look at the commercial itself, and they don't even put the phone number in the commercial. They don't have a number that's rememberable.
Right. No call to action.
My website didn't go up. My traffic didn't go up. Well, you never told people what the website is. You were just talking about your business. And that's great because you will create some trackability, residual effect of that. But the reality is you have to have your marketing message actually needs to align with what the marketing goals are.
There's 3 things that need to come out, whether it's the 15, the 30, the 60, but there is your brand. There's the pain point. What are you solving? All right. And then there is that call to action. And then everything else can paint that story. But if you don't have those 3 things, you're already sunk, right?
Yeah, and I think you start with those when you write a spot.
Right.
If you don't have those in mind, all the imagery and the whimsy, all that stuff doesn't matter if you don't have those things. It was set up from the absolute very beginning of all that. You need those things set up.
Yeah, so ultimately with radio, the very simple message I tell people is entertain, engage, and the final thing you want to remember is to ask, in a sense, for the business. We have to do that in sales all the time. We have to actually ask for the business. Yep. And if you're trying to drive results, you need to ask for the business. And you need to do it in an entertaining and engaging way. And and I would also use another E, emotional way oftentimes. When you drive emotion, you drive results. And that's the great part about radio.
And I think that's the difference in mass media. When you think about things from a mass media standpoint, it is unbelievable how much influence those radio commercials have. When you say something, we had a campaign once that we specifically said, type this in the browser window because the SEO was rigged. So if you were searching for it, something else will come up. We said, type this. The entire company changed and all of a sudden saw all the success because we were telling people what to do. It sounds crazy, but you are dealing with 400,000 people at a time. That is the masses. The masses are very easily influenced by things they have an emotional connection to. And that is something to take advantage of as you're going through this. Yeah. So, Kyle, what advice would you give? All right, so that was a new client. What about somebody? We're going into recession. We all know it. We don't want to say the dreaded R word. What do you say to people that are trying to take radio or thinking of taking radio out of their marketing mix?
Yeah, I think right now it's more important than ever to actually ask for business. There's a lot of people that we've dealt with that said, we couldn't keep people from buying our product. Well, now you have to influence. There's going to be a finite number of dollars out there that people are willing to spend. And when you get to that finite number of dollars, you are now competing harder for that money than you've ever competed before. So you have to give a reason why somebody is going to choose their product over maybe something that's not even their product. I use the example, oftentimes the Atlanta Braves, right across the street from us here at our offices. Who are they competing against for season ticket sales? Some people will say, oh, they're competing against the Hawks or the Falcons. They're not competing about the Hawks and Falcons.
Any entertainment. It
Without
could be
a
a
doubt.
restaurant. It could be, you name it. It's taking the family
out. It could be a jet
out.
ski, buying a jet ski. It could be a movie ticket. There's a lot of ways for you to spend those marketing dollars. And so they need to showcase the value of what a Braves ticket does for you as an individual when you go to have that experience.
Yeah, and I want to throw this out because, again, it's a relevant point. But one of the radio's strengths is also point of purchase, right? When you're reaching somebody about going to a restaurant, wouldn't you rather reach them when they're in their car driving, looking for somewhere to eat? So that's another really strong suit. I mean, you're driving by a stadium, you hear the commercial, you're driving out to do. It's just a really good place to reach people when they have call to action. Sitting on your couch, watching television, are you really thinking about 2 weeks down the road or what you're eating at that moment? It is a really good place to reach people. The last thing, and this is kind of man, when you're in your car and you're driving, there are so many laws against what you can and can't do, right? You can't pick up a phone, you can't call, you can't distract. Now, we all drive. There are maniacs that do all of these things the wrong way. But when you think about it, your attention is really fixated on what you are doing in that car. So radio has a really clear message. When you reach an audience, you're doing it. Now, I'm going to ask everybody in this room, when you're watching TV, how many other things are you doing? How many kids are you chasing around? How many snacks are you getting? How many times are you playing with your phone, checking scores? You're not completely engaged. It's got to be a really great product for you to be completely engaged. You are somehow, and this was a misconception, more engaged in your car than you are when you are doing browsing the internet or going. So that is a really important point.
It's a release at some point. So we got about a little over a minute left. There's a lot that has happened. What do you see happening in the next year or 2 to 3 years in radio? How do you see it continue to evolve?
Well, the first steps are starting to be made already. You look at products like the Ford Lightning just eliminated AM radio inside their car. And while everyone is in panic mode about AM radio, the reality is that people still will have FM. Most radio stations are on FM. And the second thing is there's apps. I think you're going to continue to see people learn to use their phones more, and they're going to just change the way they basically engage with the product, specifically radio, that they've always loved. As long as you have engaging entertainment on the radio, you 100% will have listeners.
Yeah, no, I actually this week was the friend who just found out about the station driving. He's a realtor, and he's like, "This is great." And then he goes, "But how do you listen to it at night?" And I go, "Here's the app." He didn't even know about the app, so we got him downloaded last night.
We always think that everybody does it, and it's such a small community that actually understands it. It's out there for everybody to get.
The adoption rate. I mean, it takes so long to get people to adopt. It's crazy.
Yeah, well, this is fantastic, Colan Wheat. Thanks for joining us, and always good to have you on here. And, I'm not sure about Nick and how that's going to be on your career.
To be determined.
To be determined. But anyhow, we'll be right back. We are the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3.
Don't miss the 10 for $10 produce sale this week at Safeway. Get select produce like large Hass avocados, mangoes, cucumbers, large lemons, green, red, or yellow bell peppers, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for only $1 each. Also this week at Safeway, select meats or buy one, get one free. Get items like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef or 16-ounce containers of Jenny O 93% lean ground turkey, burger patties or Italian style or taco style ground turkey. Buy one, get one free. Visit Safeway.com for more great deals.
Now back to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3 FM.
Welcome back. Trip Job and Nick Constantino here on the Marketing Madmen. We just had a great discussion, and I think, giving you a flavor of what radio has been, what it is, and what it's going to become with Colan. And I think, from my experience over 25 years sitting on the marketing side, I've dealt with a lot of media properties and a lot of agencies, and so I get used to what the typical sell is, and sometimes those of us business owners out there get a little bit, our eyes start to roll. But why don't we take a different perspective and maybe help those business owners with someone who's been doing this day in and day out.
Yeah, I'm proud to introduce now Jill Bernhardt. Jill has been with us for a couple of months now, 2-3 months now, I think, and she has a wealth of experiences in radio and sales in general. And we're going to talk a little bit more on the local level, the ground attack, if you will, about why radio has succeeded and how to be really good at it. So, Jill, before we go to that, give the brief synopsis, because you've been all around town
I've been all over.
of the qualifications in which brought you to be on this radio show, please.
Wow, I'm not sure that there's any, but thank you for having me. I have been doing, honestly, local radio starting in an unrated market in upstate New York in more years ago than I'm going to admit loudly here. But I've been in Atlanta radio since 1999. I have been at 1, 2, 3, 4 groups counting this one, but one of them I was there more than once.
Okay.
Which I think that's good when they'll have you back.
Yeah.
So that's I've always been in sales. I took the leap over to management for a while. I am really, really happy to be just back in sales and doing what radio does best, which what that is you make these relationships with these clients and you solve their problems. You help them, you help them figure out something that they didn't. You're a sounding board to them day in day because they forget what's going on. Because to them, things sound really normal, or it sounds, they're so used to saying the same things over and over again, or their problems are the same, and they need a different set of eyes and ears, quite honestly. So you listen to what their problems are, you're creative, and you become somebody they trust. And that's what radio can do. And radio's nimbleness, too, of being able to be seasonal, being able to be, quite honestly, moment to moment.
For sure.
That you can't change, you're certainly not television creative.
For sure.
And digital creative is hard to change that quickly as well. Audio can be live.
For sure.
And it's been really fun to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things for context is this radio station alone, 2 radio stations, we have 12 salespeople, right? When you think about that, that is 12 people out on the streets spreading the love of this radio station where we go and spreading the gospel of this station. I would be shocked if a company like Google and Facebook even had 12 people in a city like Atlanta, which is insane. To not have that connection, to not lean on those relationships makes the business transactional, which is the enemy of business, in my opinion.
Well, and that's what you were talking about is solving problems. If you can't understand your clients, how are you really going to solve their problem?
And not only that, how are you going to have any context? Because you've got to understand they're not operating their businesses in a vacuum. And Atlanta's a different city. And it's so interesting sometimes, and this is part of what I love about local sales and working with local businesses, is that you'll talk to the big brands, and they're being planned, and no offense, but by a 24-year-old in New York City who doesn't ever get in a car, so thinks nobody rides in cars anymore.
Jill's only 25, by the way.
Exactly. Exactly.
And they don't do email. They only text.
But the worst thing, though, is quite honestly, they do think that people aren't listening to radio because they're in their focus group of one. They're not.
Right.
So, yeah, working with these local businesses.
I remember when we were getting calls from Facebook, and they were trying to get us to advertise. We were talking through this. And to talk about a 25-year-old girl, we had talked about, we were advertising Extra 106.3, and we were talking about the importance of Rush Limbaugh passing. And she goes, oh, who's that? And no offense, doesn't matter where you politically lean. That is probably the single most influential person to ever grace any form of media. And this person had no clue they existed. So 2 things. 1, they didn't do any research on our company. And number 2, my goodness gracious, you have to at least know, even if you're appalled by it. So I think that's important. What about the connection to the community? Because that's something you see day in and day out, and something I think radio should pride itself on more.
Yeah, I mean, radio does, we're good citizens. We're good corporate citizens is what you see, especially from local companies, where we do things where we help the local hospitals. We help other charities. We get involved in, road races and walks that are making that are generating dollars for these charities. But they also, the local personalities, they learn what's important to them. They understand that this personality has 2 kids and, they've spent a lot of time at the Children's Hospital, so that's an important thing to them. And they talk about it and make it feel real,
right? In
a way that no other. It's an intimate one-on-one conversation.
So talk about that a little bit on the local stage. There's I from time to time I'll have businesses say, well, we probably can't afford to have local talent or a personality or whatever. How does that come about? How should someone think about using it? And relatively, is it affordable? Depending on who you use, but what's the right decision to determine who you go after?
Quite honestly, I feel like if it's organic, that's the jackpot.
Okay.
Is if you're a business and you know that somebody's is local talent and they actually are your customer. That right there that's the jackpot, because they don't have to manufacture anything. So the next step would be to have your salesperson introduce them to your product, and it's got to be genuine, because you can really tell when you hear and it's not. But most of these people, these local talent are local people who live in your city, and they function, they get in their cars and they go to work, and they have families, and They do, and so they do use these products, and we trust them. And that's the other thing that radio can bring is credibility to a charity, to a community, to a product, anything. It makes it feel real and like, oh, okay, I heard it on the radio, so it must be real.
And I will say one thing for the advertiser, we're very protective over who uses endorsements. One, because if everybody used one, the station would sound horrible. Two, we're rebranding this station based upon your brand. I'm not doing it for a month. These are minimums attached to it, so you got to be serious about advertising. And if you are, there are very few cases where the right endorser will not benefit your brand. So that's just how we go about it. I'm sure everybody does it a little bit differently. We also have live reads, which it's essential to be able to do it on the fly. That dynamism that Jill was talking about is that, what if it rains? Can they talk about, hey, it's raining, it's time to get waterproofing? That goes a long flexibility. It goes a really long way. All right, so we got about 2 minutes left, Jill. So you've been with now Dickey Broadcasting for 2-3 months. What has the experience been like? I'll leave the room just in case.
No. I am so grateful, quite honestly, because it wasn't something I thought I was going to do, and for a lot of reasons it happened. And like every day I'm like, I can't believe they pay me to do this. Because I'm bringing a product that I'm seeing how it works, but I'm seeing that they're listening and creating solutions. And at the end of the day, if a business owner is writing their check, they're writing their, this is essentially they're pulling out their checkbook. And I'm not calling on any big accounts. I'm not working with Home Depot, people's like where you say, what's the budget? They don't have a budget, and they're going to write me a check. So it better work. And I have I've got the tools here to make it work. So it's just been really, really fun to see that radio's not going anywhere. No matter what anybody says, it's here, it works, and just do it right.
Yeah, no,
Awesome.
it's
Love it.
It's been around, it's proven it. Look, it's evolved. We all have to evolve, right?
Absolutely.
But I think there's just talking about the apps and other ways to connect your message, and the ability is, I think Nick was saying earlier, to, bring it with other parts of your marketing mix through the digital and really build a whole strategic plan is so critical.
Absolutely. I mean, as I've been able to work with some clients I had worked with in other places, I don't want them to do just this. You want them to do a bunch of things or a variety of things that are strategic and not just throwing spaghetti at the wall. Yeah. That have, so you've got a plan and get results.
Absolutely. Well, Jill, thanks so much. And Colan, appreciate you joining us. This is kind of the second in our series of talking about different medium. Last week doing social media and then radio today. And over the next month or so, Nick and I plan to hit we're going to hit print. We're going to try to get into TV. We'll do SEO and digital
some
and a few others.
Some sports marketing.
So
sure.
we're trying to give you a sense of all that. So great week and enjoyed it. You've been listening to the Marketing Madmen on Extra 106.3.
Don't miss the 10 for $10 produce sale this week at Safeway. Get select produce like large Hass avocados, mangoes, cucumbers, large lemons, green, red, or yellow bell peppers, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby peeled carrots for only $1 each. Also this week at Safeway, select meats or buy one, get one free. Get items like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef or 16-ounce containers of Jenny O 93% lean ground turkey, burger patties or Italian style or taco style ground turkey. Buy one, get one free. Visit Safeway.com for more great deals.
This morning in the Atlanta airport, no one's missing a meal on Mac Wilburn's watch. With 11 restaurants to serve passengers, he's got dining for every destination. And it all started when Mac talked with First Horizon Bank about opening a franchise in the airport. Now it's open for business and cleared for takeoff. First Horizon Bank. Let's find a way. Go to firsthorizon.com/Mac. First Horizon Bank, member FDIC.